Imagine this. It's April 1st, 1945. While most of America is laughing at April Fool's jokes, on the other side of the Pacific Ocean, the largest amphibious assault of the entire war in the Pacific is thundering ashore. More than 180,000 U.S. troops land on the beaches of Okinawa, waves of Marines and soldiers storming into the teeth of Japanese defenses. But hidden within this massive invasion force are only 150 men, carrying weapons so strange and futuristic that even their fellow Americans called them Buck Rogers ray guns. And yet, those 150 weapons, equipped with an invention so advanced it looked like it came from science fiction, would account for nearly 30% of all Japanese soldiers killed by rifle fire on the island. Let that sink in. Not from thousands of rifles, not from endless artillery bombardments, but from 150 night vision carbines. How do we even begin to understand this turning point in history when, for the first time, humans fought with eyes that could pierce total darkness? To understand the impact, you need to rewind 2 years back to the steaming jungles of Guadalcanal and New Guinea. Imagine being a young American soldier, bone-tired after a day of firefights and artillery, praying for some sleep, only to realize the night itself is the enemy. You hear it. The faint rustle of leaves, a twig snapping in the distance. Then nothing. Hours pass, and just as your eyelids fall, a scream pierces the dark. A Japanese raiding team has slit the throat of your buddy in the next foxhole. This wasn't an accident. It was Japanese strategy, night infiltration, silent bayonet attacks, ghost-like movements. And for Americans, it was psychological warfare at its most brutal. As Technical Sergeant William Morrison once said, you'd hear them moving out there in the dark, rustling in the leaves. You couldn't see a damn thing, but you knew they were coming. Think about the sheer terror, fighting all day, and then waiting in the dark, heart pounding, knowing death might be creeping closer but invisible. Now pause for a second. Put yourself in that jungle. What would you give to have eyes that could see through the night? Because that's exactly what the U.S. Army began experimenting with in response. Infrared sniper scopes. By the time of Okinawa, the M3 Carbine equipped with the T120 scope was in the hands of 150 carefully selected soldiers, and when night fell, something extraordinary happened. Suddenly, the hunters became the hunted. Japanese raiding parties, used to slipping unseen into American lines, were caught in the open. Imagine their shock, moving silently through the dark, believing they were invisible, and then dropping one by one, picked off by invisible beams of light they could never detect. To the Americans, these scopes turned the battlefield into a video game long before video games existed. As one soldier later joked, it was like turning on the lights in a haunted house. You still knew the monsters were there, but now you could shoot them first. But here's where it gets even more chilling. Within the first week of combat on Okinawa, those 150 night vision carbines accounted for 30%. Yes, 30% of all Japanese combat deaths caused by small arms fire on the island. Think about that math. An island battle involving nearly 200,000 troops, massive artillery barrages, naval gunfire, even kamikaze planes raining down from the skies, and yet the deadliest riflemen weren't the thousands of ordinary soldiers. They were a handful of men carrying science fiction weapons that turned darkness into daylight. It was as if the future had crashed down on the battlefield overnight. But here's the question. Was this truly the first step into modern warfare as we know it, or just a terrifying experiment? Because while these weapons changed the battlefield, they also raised new questions about technology, humanity, and the future of war. And in Part 2, we'll uncover how Japanese soldiers reacted to this ghostly threat, what it meant for the war in the Pacific, and why the lessons of Okinawa still echo in today's night vision-equipped armies. Stay with me, because the story only gets darker.
Let's pick up where we left off. The island of Okinawa is burning. Artillery thunders day and night. Kamikaze planes crash into American ships offshore, and every hillside is laced with Japanese bunkers and caves. Yet under the cover of darkness, when Japanese soldiers traditionally held the advantage, the battlefield has changed forever. The M3 infrared carbine has turned their most trusted weapon, the night itself, into a death trap. Picture a Japanese infiltration squad creeping forward, thinking they are ghosts. Suddenly, without warning, shots ring out. One man falls. Then another. The survivors panic. They cannot see who is firing. They cannot even imagine how the Americans can find them. Some Japanese soldiers thought the U.S. had summoned spirits. Others whispered of ray guns that fired death beams through the dark. Fear, the very weapon they once used against Americans, now turned back on them with tenfold intensity. But the deeper truth is more human. These 150 American soldiers weren't superheroes. They were often terrified young men themselves, carrying heavy batteries on their backs, scopes the size of small telescopes on their carbines, sweating and straining under the weight of technology that sometimes failed in the mud and rain. They weren't immune to fear, but what they carried gave them confidence, and confidence changes everything. Imagine the feeling of scanning a dark ridge, expecting an ambush, and suddenly seeing figures glowing in your scope like shadows on fire. For the first time in this brutal Pacific campaign, American soldiers owned the night. That shift alone saved thousands of lives. Now here's where it gets fascinating. You might think these scopes were everywhere after Okinawa, but you'd be wrong. The technology was so new, so fragile, and so costly that the U.S. Army kept it limited, experimental, almost secret. In fact, very few ordinary Americans back home even knew their boys were fighting with what looked like science fiction rifles. And after the war, this technology didn't vanish. It evolved. What started as a bulky backpack and carbine in 1945 grew into the sleek night vision goggles and scopes used in Korea, Vietnam, and today by every modern army on Earth. Every single time you see soldiers in the news moving silently in green-lit night vision footage, that legacy traces directly back to the beaches of Okinawa. One could argue that April 1945 was the birth of modern battlefield dominance, the moment when seeing became surviving. But pause for a second. Step back from the technology. There's a haunting question underneath all of this. Did these infrared carbines simply give American troops an edge, or did they fundamentally change the nature of war? Think about it. For centuries, soldiers fought blind at night. Darkness meant rest or terror or uncertainty. After Okinawa, night became just another battlefield. No more ghosts, no more invisible enemies, but also no more limits. Technology erased one of humanity's oldest barriers, and once you erase one limit, what comes next? If you can see in the dark, why not see through walls? If you can turn night into day, why not bend time itself with drones, satellites, and AI-controlled weapons? Do we even control the machines we build, or do they control us, dragging us into wars we can no longer recognize? That's the cliff we stand on today. The same Buck Rogers ray guns that stunned the Japanese in 1945 opened the door to a new kind of warfare, a kind that hasn't stopped evolving. And it started with 150 carbines on Okinawa, a few men, a few weapons, a small step that forever changed how armies fight, how nations think, and how soldiers live or die. So here's my challenge to you. The next time you see night vision footage on the news, or a green-tinted raid halfway across the world, remember that it began on a blood-soaked island in 1945. Technology doesn't just change war, it changes us. And the question is, are we ready for what comes next? If you want to explore more stories like this, the hidden weapons, the forgotten battles, the innovations that shaped the world we live in, then don't stop here. Click on the next video where we dive into another secret of World War II, the weapon that terrified even Hitler himself. Trust me, you won't want to miss it.